Calvin T. Mann, leading MD, served over 20,000 youth through speaking, coaching, and mentoring. He has inspired us for years. Welcome to METV Podcast with your host, Calvin T. Mann, the Encourager.
Well, good evening. As usual, I am your host, Calvin T. Mann. I am in the studio. I am Hetheru, filling in for Calvin T. Mann for the takeover, as my sisters and I will share some really important insights around safety and safe behind the mask. But today, we're going to offer you some deeper information. So we're going to look at how we hide violence behind the mask and still believe that we're safe. And we're going to look at that from a financial, a personal protection, and a spiritual perspective. And so we invite you to please get pen and paper, take some notes. We want you to be changed by the information that we're sharing. We're not just here in the studio having a good time, although we do, with our favorite engineer, El Boogin, with us, but we are actually here because we want to share some vital information because we're talking about moving us to this next level and this next season. So that's really important. So I'm going to just let my sisters introduce themselves first. I'll start with Rochelle, since she's to my right. Rochelle, tell us a little bit about you. Tell us a little bit about what your idea of safety might be, and then we'll get into the violence after that.
Okay. Well, good evening or late afternoon, everyone. My name is Rochelle Morton, and I am a representative of Damsel in Defense, which is a personal protection and safety products company, primarily for women and their families. And you wanted me to tell one more thing?
Yeah, tell a little about just safety, how you feel about safety.
I've always had, a challenge with feeling safe ever since I was little, but nothing like what I feel today in today's world. I believe that we should always have something to protect ourselves with. Our hands should never be empty. We need to be able to access some level of personal protection at some point. And it's not always deadly force that you need to use in a particular situation, but you do need to somehow, possibly level the playing field a little bit and have something to be able to defend yourself with, because at the end of the day, your family, your loved ones are looking for you to come back home. And your life is worth the fight, and you always have to have that as your mentality.
Thank you. Absolutely. Crystal, how about you? How do we look at our financial safety?
Well, you see it so much now where someone passes away and they don't have any type of life insurance, right? And so now you're passing that burden on to your friends and your family. So you didn't provide the safety for your family, right? But then there's also the violence that comes along with in relationships due to financial infidelity, if you will, right? And so that looks like the shopping and not letting your spouse know that you're shopping, right? So you're hiding the bags, the boxes, and all of that. But it also is, not disclosing debt and keeping those secrets that can lead to additional debt and bad credit, and that can cause disharmony in that relationship. And if someone isn't, when people get angry, sometimes things happen, right? And so it absolutely can. Those sort of things can lead to arguments, dissatisfaction, and even violence inside that relationship. So you got to have those conversations around those finances. You got to have them from the beginning. And because you asked me a question right off the rip, I'm Crystal Gunn. So founder of the Amazing Woman Network, and also I am a financial strategist, and I specify with women, single women and single mothers, because it's different having that one income in the household. I will do strategy for anybody, but my specialty is with women and single mothers.
Thank you. Thank you for being here. And I am Hetheru, personal change coach with Your Inspired Journey, but I continue my journey with Encourage Me I'm Young as the executive director. So my work and my purpose work is to make sure that we are sharing information and resources to restore the family. I think when we look at family restoration, we're talking about safety on a whole nother level. And some of the things that we're going to talk to you about today are not just for the individuals, but for family safety. As we frame that kind of, because this is METV, we want to make sure that we frame that with our larger mission, which is around the restoration of families through seeding the lives of boys. So you often hear conversations with Calvin and Dave, who are actually the main hosts and co-hosts of the show. You hear a lot of conversation that they bring to the table from the male's perspective. And so today, when we call this the takeover, we're taking over the conversation from the female perspective. And so that's a single moms, wives, wives to be, those of us who are seeking more substantial relationships, whether that is a marriage, whether it's a healthy relationship with a mate, partner, and moving into some lifelong lessons. So I am she who will help us to facilitate this conversation. And I want to really start. So I use the Merriam-Webster dictionary to define so that we can define and refine violence. I want to really talk about this term because when we think about violence, we normally think about physical contact and punching and hitting and shooting and that type of violence. But I want to make sure that we really understand that when we're talking about violence, we're talking about violations. And those violations can come in different ways. So I'm going to give you, these are the 5 different definitions that Merriam-Webster dictionary offers. The first one is the use of physical force so as to injure, abuse, damage, or destroy. And again, that says physical force. The second one is injury, or as if by distortion, infringement, or nonconformity. And then they had a note that it also means outrage. The third one is intense, turbulent, or furious, and often destructive action or force. The fourth one is heated feelings or expressions, an instance of such action or feeling. And the last one is clashing or jarring quality. And so that's a huge perspective to take on violence. So that means that violence can be an act that is actually not physical but verbal. It could be an action that somebody takes that is in violation of another person or even on yourself, because you can show violence against yourself too, according to these definitions. The arguments that we often have, even when we're struggling with ourselves, right? You can still perpetrate violence on yourself, and you can perpetrate so much violence on yourself that it will cause you to not perform an action. It could paralyze you because you've worked yourself all the way up into a frenzy around a feeling or emotion that may or may not be real. And so we want to talk a little bit about that today. I'm going to address specifically around our spiritual safety and kind of what that means to me. It really is the deeper meaning. When I look at the spirit of a person, I look at the circumstances that impact long term, that go through your fibers of your body into your action and into your deep memory. So when I look at spirit, I look at really how we internalize things, it's deeper than just the skin. And so I really want us to look at it kind of from that perspective as we talk about more about safety. So if you think about violence, if you look at the definitions of violence, which one do you think that what you're going to share with us today, what does that look like for you if you were to go by these definitions?
Wow. I'm going to go with the first one more so than the others, okay. Because it's, for me, and what I talk about is the physical aspect of violence and okay. It being committed against a person. Okay. So that's probably where my focus will be.
Okay. Crystal, how about you?
2, 3, and 4.
Okay.
So injury by or as if by distortion, infringement, or nonconformity, that outrage, intense, turbulent, or furious and often destruction, action, or force, and then the heated feeling of expression, an instance of such action or feeling. And so all of that can happen when you have that financial disharmony in a relationship.
Absolutely. And when I look at violence against our spiritual being, this is against ourselves or others, because it can be all of these. I can see the violence as there are people who I guess one of the terms is called cutters, right? Mm-hmm. People who get who try to cope through causing physical harm to their bodies, and it's a phenomenon that happens to a lot of people. And I just want to say that, and I know people are going to probably not be happy with me with this comment, but also some people who get tattoos, and they constantly get tattoos. That is another way that people often perpetrate violence against their own bodies, because there is pain associated, and I'm talking about real, right? There is pain associated with the action. So is the outcome worth the action? And then what long term, how does that impact you? Because it's not something that you can take back, right? It's something that it's designed to be permanent. And so, but just something to think about, that is it the actual art form that you're appreciating and that's what you want to be a part of, or is this some type of punishment to your body for something else? And sometimes I know there are people, and I'm not saying this is everybody, but I want you to think deeper about the action. And as you're making that decision, because it's a very personal decision, because it's something that's very personal, but your reasons behind it, not just the fad part of it, or that you're looking at something that has meaning and purpose. How are the other ways that you could have expressed that same thing? Because it is a portion of pain. There's pain that goes along with that, and is that one of the ways that we're hiding how we really feel? Is it some way that we are using that as a coping skill? So that's important for us to look at as a different perspective, because I know that's a very heated conversation to have.
Yeah, you just upset the whole.
Well, I mean, but it's true. It's a perspective that a lot of people don't take.
True.
And I've talked to, so I do this work. So I've talked to several women who get it, and they get it to brand as a branding of an event. It's to say that this was the choice I made. It might be somebody's name. It might be a significant date. It might be I'll never go back to this, and this is my remind. So it's a lot of those kinds of thoughts that people have, but they don't associate that with violence. But it when you use it in that way, that is a form of violence according to these definitions. So that's one aspect I would like to kind of bring to the surface. Another form of violence is when we put ourselves down. So you may go in the mirror and you're looking at your body and you're like, I hate this about me. I hate this and I hate that. And that's a form of violence. That's a form of violence against yourself. And so as you gain new tools and new information, that part of you should change. And so that's an important part that should change, because that is going to carry over. Your words in and of itself has power. And that's what you're putting back into your own body. That's what you're putting into your spirit. That's what you're receiving. And when you have children, that's what they hear as well. They hear what you say about your body. And because they're a part of you, an extension of you, they may feel that same way and take ownership over that. My body was different before I had pregnant, and before, some of the things that we say, we don't recognize them as the violence, but those are some of the ways that we also express violence. So by what we say, by what we do, not just to ourselves, but what we do to others inadvertently is also a part of that violence that we are going to talk about today. So the first question that I have for our specialists here are, how do we experience violence? So do you want to give some examples? Crystal, let's start with you first.
Well, you gave us a whole new outlook on the definition of violence, right? Which, thank you. And it's always good to go to the actual definition. But how do we experience violence from a financial standpoint? That destructive behavior that we do, right? Spending what we don't really have, right? Or saying, I'm going to go and I'm buying this when really you need to be paying your mortgage or your rent or your DTE bill, right? Or other destructive things are, not taking care of your credit, right? That's destructive behavior because it is going to come back and bite you at some point. So those sort of things, not having a financial plan is destructive, right? I always talk about operating in that survival mode. That's destructive, right? And you have to recognize what those modes are and why you operate that way. But also not having those conversations with your potential other, right? So it could be you've been dating somebody for a while, or now you all are more serious, or now you all are married. Not having those financial conversations and not recognizing the money mindset of the person that you're with can add to destruction, disharmony, discord, and totally mess up a relationship. So I think we need to pay attention to those things that we wouldn't ordinarily associate with being violent, right? Mm-hmm. But they are violence against ourselves, our children, because how are we setting our children up financially?
Yeah.
Right? So we definitely have to look at those things. But also, you spoke about the things that you say to yourself, right? Which has a direct impact on your self-worth, and your finances also have an impact or are directly related to your self-worth as well. And we kind of touched on that last week, but all of those things go into play, and you wind up having these violent acts on yourself and onto those around you, and you don't even recognize it.
How do you see that? So give our audience an idea of how we might, have that violent conversation with ourselves. Like, what would be some of the things, just so that people can have some triggers? Like, if I've said this, then that might be a show of violence, and a show of you might need to take some different steps.
Retail therapy.
Okay.
A term that I just despise, right? Because it's not really therapy, first of all. It's damaging. But to do it, a lot of times someone's saying, I'm going shopping, but they're going shopping for this retail therapy, but is there a negative impact to you spending this money? Right? So that winds up being a form of, in my opinion, of violence toward you. So what is that, and why do you need to do that? And what is not being taken care of as a result of all of this retail therapy that you're doing, right? That other violence is just over shopping and hiding that information from your mate, right? So you got the Amazon boxes coming on a daily basis, but you're hiding them before, your mate gets home, so that you don't know. And for me, that dishonesty is always a form of violence, right? Because you're being dishonest with yourself, and now you're being dishonest with someone else. And as I've always told my child since she was young, how you do anything is how you do everything.
Ooh, so say that again.
Absolutely. How you do anything is how you do everything.
Wow.
So if you are out spending money and you're hiding it from your significant other, what else are you hiding from your significant other?
Wow. That's food for thought.
Yeah, because where there is one, there is another. And since apparently today is going to be a day about messing with the masses and people being upset about what we say, let me just go for it, right? So you have people out there who are looking for someone to pay their bills, take care of them, provide them with money, right? So you're looking for an asset, yet you are a liability.
Ooh.
Right?
Ooh.
So
Ouch.
right? You want an asset, but you are a liability. And that liability is really and truly a form of violence against that other person. Right? So you have to go back and look at, why do I need that? Why do I not want to be an asset? Because like-minded individuals financially, excuse me, are going to have a more successful relationship. Because you're not going to be arguing about the small things, which become big things, which then become violent things, be it physical or verbal or mental, emotional. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Wow. Rochelle.
I don't know how to come back from that.
Right.
I'm going to do my best not to anger anybody. I'm the nice one today.
You're only going to deal with how to really, defend yourself in the physical sense, right?
Yeah.
Right.
But
With the Kobaton. Mm-hmm. So talk to us about that. Talk to us about, I really would like for you to get into more intimate partner violence.
yes.
And I also, if you will, want you to talk about what that looks like with our young adults, our teens in relationships. And if you will, and I know I'm on toes now, if you will, with same-sex relationships and what you've seen and what you've heard in those kind of environments.
Okay. So, where do I start? Just the physical violence, and a lot of times we tend to think that it's just, the men that are being, the physical abusers of women. But there are situations where the women are the aggressors, and I know a few who are the domineering ones in certain situations. And, it's really a statement of power that a person has over the other. And, so when you are the victim, you definitely lose self-confidence. And that abuser will absolutely continue to pile on and continue to increase the level of control they have over you. And that can be whether it's, same sex or not.
Okay.
And with our teens, that's another, really scary area where parents really need to take the time to have those honest conversations with their children, not to be dictatorial. You have to have the shoulder-to-shoulder conversations with your children, and you really need to have them early. But you need to have them because if they don't learn it from you as the parent, they're going to learn something from someone, and it may not be what you want them to know.
Absolutely.
So you have to take control over that and have the difficult conversations. And then the other thing that really, really is very scary for me is to recognize that children, innocent children, are watching the violence happen between their parents. And, depending on how severe that violence is, those children are traumatized. Just last week, I met with an owner of a domestic violence shelter. She has a home, and she takes in these women. She takes in other people, too, but I was specifically there for domestic violence awareness. And when I walked in, she had 2 dogs that came running up to me. They were friendly dogs. One's really, really big, and someone else could be very intimidated by it. But she was saying that the dogs are not necessarily there for protection, but they're really there so that the children have something to play with and take care of and take their mind off of what they just left from being able to flee with their mom to a safe place. And so, just the stories that she shared with me, the moms who, walk their children to school, because this is right in the neighborhood. But they walked the children to school. One mom walked her children to school, and on the way back, the husband or the abuser managed to find her walking back. And by the time she came back to the facility, she had a black eye.
Wow.
And so things like that are just, it's degrading. And it's hard to have a level of self-confidence when you've been the punching bag. So all I can say, is for those of us who haven't experienced it, thank God. Thank God. And if you have an encouraging word, for someone who has, covered up the bruises or the injuries or whatever, just encourage them, give them the love and support, because they certainly are not getting it, from others. But just give them, some encouragement and help them to build their own self-confidence so that they can actually leave that situation, if at all possible, and develop a plan of action to be able to escape and to leave it permanently and leave it alive and not in another form.
Yes. Wow.
And to piggyback on that, you have in those relationships, because you mentioned the controlling piece, but that's also that financial piece, right? So they're not only controlling about where they're going and what they're doing, but also it's controlling about the funds, the money that they're spending, or how they're spending the money too. So it all just becomes this ever spiraling phenomenon that you do ultimately wind up passing to your child, because they now believe this is what they grew up with. So they don't recognize it as dysfunction. They recognize it, this is what's normal. And so they'll wind up repeating those cycles as well.
That's right.
Yes, and absolutely. It is just a reason to pause and consider how many people are affected every day. And it's almost like the statistic that you talk about. Share that statistic again, please.
Well, so it's 1 out of every 5 women is a survivor of rape, and 1 out of every 3 women is a survivor of domestic violence. Now, the other thing that this owner also shared with me is that the funding, for the house is difficult to come across, a sufficient amount of funds. But she mentioned that she has empty beds now that she can't fill because of funding. She's able to take in a few families, but not many. And she receives 7 to 8 calls every single day from women who are trying to flee and find somewhere safe to go. And she has to say no. And so, I'm doing some things on my end to help, just every month send some funds her way to, to help. But that's just one house.
Exactly.
That's just one, so.
And I think that what that opens a door for is, how do we now take care of our homes? First, the very physical one, our homes, our body, our temple. How do we take care of that better? Yeah. And so as we just pause for all of those who have endured, those who have learned to change your mind, and learn to change your mind about your finances, about how you want to live, and choosing to live is really important, because we're all interconnected in that way. And so how we support each other, one way that we can support each other, of course, is through groups, right? We do a lot through our groups. Just about, it's not very difficult to form or find groups, right? But you want to find the right one for you, where you can be accepted, where your thoughts and words and opinions are valued. So you want to find that safe space. That's really important. Where is that safe space for you? That's one way that we can start. Another area I think that we need to be aware of our safety, our spiritual safety in particular, is, what do we believe? I think when Crystal talked about finances, what are our beliefs around finances? What are our beliefs around, having to choose that you plan to survive, and by all means necessary, I'm going to survive. And how do you do that in a way that you're still able to live where the karma that comes back to you is to your benefit and not your detriment? So you reap what you sow. And I'm not adding that to that conversation. What I'm saying is, what you want and how you live your life is going to be important to how you receive your life. how some of the areas that you receive. So, and we know we consider those spiritual laws and principles, but that, we've heard it a couple of different ways. What goes around comes around, living by the golden rule. All of those things are in place, not just as a cliche, but it's lessons, it's nuggets in that. And so applying those things to your life and in a way that helps to satisfy those things that you need. And I say that we always need to start off this journey, this process, with recognizing your joy. So I know there are a couple of things you're going to hear me say constantly. That's going to be one of them from here forward. Because if you don't know what brings you joy and you only know what brings you stress, you're going to focus on the stress. So one thing, wherever you are right now, I want you to stop. Let's stop, drop, and roll. That's what I tell you when you're on fire, right? Stop, drop, and roll. So what I want you to do is stop, take a minute, at least five things that you know that bring you joy, that are not connected to somebody else. What you do for somebody else, and there's nothing wrong with feeling good about doing something for somebody else. That's perfectly okay. That's not what I'm talking about. I'm talking about if you like a hot chocolate and a good book and that's what you do for yourself, that you spend that hour or 30 minutes in your comfortable chair, in your pajamas, in your footies, whatever makes you happy, in that happy space, then do that for you. That should be at the top of your list. If you like walking and you feel that helps you to release stress, that quiet time for you, put that on your list. If it is, I'm not going to say the retail therapy, but if it's feeling like you were able to buy a specific thing that you had on your wish list, that now you're able to take that thing off your wish list. Having a wish list then should be on your list, right? Creating a wish list. And I think that's important for everybody, especially our males. I think they are the ones that are the furthest away from identifying their joy. And so they have to find it in other places, which are acceptable places to find it, right? We always think, okay, when guys are engaged in sports, that's their acceptable space. Well, still that's something either that you may be doing with someone or for someone. But if it's for you, so what you might do for you is, I always wanted the baseball cap from the Chiefs, and that's what I got, right? That's something that you did for you that's not necessarily attached to other people, but it gives you a sense of belonging. So that's fine. Find 5 things that bring you joy. And you can't put on this particular list. Don't put on spending time with my kids, watching my kids smile. Those things are wonderful and good, but the essence of it is not you. That's a part of you, but that's not the essence of where you find your joy. Perhaps your joy is found in, I feel valued. I feel valued and important because I'm able to have this spend fund, right? I have my mad money over here, or my holiday money, or whatever it is, that I was able to accomplish this, so I have this little nest egg. In spite of anything else that might go on, I still have this little piece of something for me. Whatever that means for you. So find your joy. Again, find your joy. That has to be your ground zero. That has to be where you build from. So I want to make sure that when you don't have your joy, then you're more likely to experience violence. And that's violence behind the mask. That's the violence that people don't talk about, is that you don't have any direction. I don't have anything that makes me feel good, so I'm always feeling bad. These things make me upset. These things hurt me, but I don't have anything. I could be in the neutral zone where today I'm not upset or today my feelings aren't hurt, but that's the neutral zone. That's not joy. The opposite of your stress, you find your joy, not the neutral zone. So when you don't have that, that's a form of violence against yourself. You need to find your joy because you build from there. So our next subject that we're going to talk about is how do we bounce back? Now, let's say that we're at our ground zero, wherever our ground zero is in our safety, wherever our ground zero is in our finances, or wherever our ground zero is in our spiritual work, right? our acceptance of who we are, wherever we are there, whatever ground zero is, where do we bounce back from there? Thoughts.
I'm going to start that off by saying something that you just said earlier. And again, I said it last week as well. You have to have someone that you can talk to, right? Because in a lot of instances, you're at ground zero, but you don't know what to do in order to get to that next level, right? And those people that you talk to are not always going to be those that are closest to you. But you have to start that conversation. You have to go back and you have to look at, what do you want, right? I so many times I ask, well, what do you want? What does your amazing look like? Where do you want to be? And the answer is, they don't know.
I don't know. Mm-hmm.
And so the biggest challenge, I think, from ground zero is figuring out what you want. Not what you want because of your kids, not what you want because of your spouse, not what you want because of your friends and family and this image that you have to project, right? But what do you really want? What is your ideal life? What is your ideal finance? What is your ideal relationship? What is your ideal, spiritual relationship? What does that look like? And I think once you figure that out, which is not always easy, but once you figure that out and you start to figure that out and you start to walk those steps towards it, again, I think that's where you start with ground zero, because ground zero is, what do you want now? Like, what's next for you? What's important for you? And with all that goes on in the world, with all that's on social media, it's hard for you to figure that out. So you gotta, it's a lot of noise. So you have to peel back the layers, and you have to, you got to strip yourself of all of that and figure out what's really important for you in this life.
Absolutely right. Absolutely right. All right, Rochelle, what do you think? Where do you bounce back?
So I agree with what Crystal said, and I would add the first thing for me in order to bounce back whenever I'm at ground zero is to pretty much unplug from everything.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And then just spend quiet time with God. Mm-hmm. I have to go to him, and my question to him, because that, to me, when I'm at ground zero, now I'm in my down sitting space. He has actually had me sit down somewhere, and it's because he's trying to get my attention. I'm busy all over the place doing all kinds of things, and I'm not doing his work, and I'm not putting him first. So in my down sitting, that's when I need to actually have my talk with him and ask the very direct question, what do you want me to do? And if I ask that question and I sit quietly and listen to the answer, because of course, we talked about there being a lot of noise out there, but you got to figure out the quiet noise is what you really want to tune into and silence all that loud stuff. And we can do it. We just have to ask him again for help on silencing what, we don't need to be listening to. But for me, once I actually hear what it is that he's telling me, and it could be, something that I'm internalizing, or it could be a song that happens to be playing. It could be somebody that's telling me something, some special person that he's put in my space at that particular time to really awaken me. Once I hear what that is, the next step is for me to act and to be obedient about it. And a lot of times we think, well, that's not really what he meant, or he wasn't talking to me, that doesn't apply to me. And yes, it does. Yes, it does. And it's time for you to figure out how. And if you don't know how, then you still ask the question, or you continue to ask God to reveal to you, because his wisdom is free. All you have to do is ask for it. But if you don't ask, just like when we don't ask for the money, it's not just going right. But, we just have to, continue to ask the question. And he absolutely does not mind questions. He doesn't want you questioning him, but he does not mind answering your questions and giving you the additional wisdom because you've asked for it. So he's going to give you even more than what you've asked for. But you have to be obedient with what he tells you and not do things your way and think that your way is his way.
Right.
You got to put that in check. So
you also have to take ownership, right? That's really huge. Like, how am I here? How did I get here? Not what someone else did in that, because there are other characters in your play, right? But my role, what was my role in this? And then how do I change it so that I don't relive this character again?
Yeah.
So that ownership is key.
It is. That's part of your uprising or upstanding, however you want to put it. But in order, once you've been in that down sitting place and it's time to get up, now you have to look yourself in the mirror and say, okay, this is what I own. This is what I did. I'm not going to repeat that. I've learned my lesson. God, guide me, and I will follow.
And so I will follow that up with actually needing the tools to be able to do that. A lot of us know that it's something that we need to do. We may even know that's something that we should do, but we can't seem to get the momentum. Like at the beginning of the year, a lot of people make New Year's resolutions, right? We look forward to the coming year, and this year I'm going to XYZ. I'm not going to repeat, QPW, right? We have a lot of that. The challenge is, how do we stay consistent? And I'm going to give you my formula for change. You'll hear this over and over again. You can visit my YouTube page, Hetheru Personal Change Coach. I have a video where you can look at it over and over and over again until you get it. The first step is that you need new information. You have to have more information than you did before. So part of that information, what that looks like is Crystal referred a therapist or a personal change coach, or this video. Rochelle said, well, you might want to read this book. All of those things are new information, new ways to get information. Girl, you just have to read this book. Well, I ain't reading no book. I'm not spending my time. Okay, so if book is not your thing, you might need to have someone who can walk you through a process. And maybe you need to start with a therapist or a counselor before you do a life coach or a change coach. It doesn't matter where you start. The idea is that you do. So first thing you need is new information. That means that the information, if you've already asked for help, if you've already committed to do whatever your next step is, and when that information cycles back to your hands, that means take it. Put it in your hand. Use the information. Use the tools. That's the first thing.
Can I get new information from the people who know the information, though?
Right, your credible source.
Right.
You absolutely need to have a credible source. So if you typically get your information from your friends or your parents or that circle, you may need a new information source, because sometimes we just need new tools. New tools. And so the next step you have to do is you actually have to apply it. But I'm going to tell you that changing your mind and your mindset is not easy, because it's a biochemical process. That means that there's something that has to happen in you consistently with your brain. And what did I say? I always say it takes 10 to 21 days to form a new habit. It takes three consecutive 21-day cycles, which is 63 consecutive days, to form a new lifestyle. So that means you have to continue. So when you know that, I don't want to do this anymore, what that process that's really happening in your mind is that the chemical, the feel-good chemical, right there, serotonin, or the cortisol, which is the stress chemical, is stressing you out to try to do something new because you're used to doing this thing over and over again. You have to recognize that that's what it is. The change has to be biochemical. So it's neurons in your brain that actually have to take root to the new thing that you're doing, and that happens through thought, word, and deed. That means you have to do something. You have to speak it. You have to speak your success. You have to speak. That's why affirmations became so popular, because that's one of the steps in the process. So if you say you want to change and you keep saying, I'm going to go back to him because it was safer over here. I know I had to deal with this, but I'd rather deal with this than be by myself. Okay, well, you spoke that. And so that's what's going to keep happening to you. You're going to keep feeling isolated, and you keep going back into circumstances that you have been removed from, and as some may say, delivered from. You go back to the same thing, but it has to change. You have to commit to that first 10 to 21 days just for the idea to take place in your mind so that your thoughts become accustomed to the new thing that you say you want. So that's what you're speaking. That's the action that you're supporting. That means you're not going back. You're not accepting calls. You're not sending text messages. You're not following that person on social media. That means that when you say that it's over and done, that you're going in a new direction, you actually have to turn and go in that direction. And sometimes it's difficult because now you have to deal with the stress of the separation. Yes. Mm-hmm. That stress of the separation will draw you back. It'll turn you back if you really don't have something that you're really looking to. Change, new information, tools, application. The next part of it, you have to appreciate what you got. You have to appreciate the source. So if I'm your personal change coach and I tell you I have 25 years of working with over 20,000 people, I think you should appreciate that about me.
I think so.
I think that's enough credible information for you to say, well, maybe she knows what she's talking about. Maybe I should stick this out that 21 days. Let me get through the first 21 days and then I'll see. Okay, do something different. Appreciate that information. Then once you get through that first 21-day cycles and you look at that second one and you're approaching that third one, you get to see the change in your own being and your lifestyle. You see the changes happening around you. People will always confirm it for you when they see you change. Mm-hmm. What did you do different to your hair? Well, you seem happier. Wow, I never seen you this way. But they confirm it for you to let you know that you're going in the right direction. You're doing the right thing. Hang in there. Recognize those gifts along your journey as you're taking that pathway that way. We're going to wrap up. I just want to make sure that we have given you some good tools. I hope you guys took some good information. We're going to do a couple of recaps, but we want you to do this one thing. We want and need for you to keep safe. Yes. So that means that we're asking that you take on this new information, that you appreciate it because of the sources. We are here because we are experts in our field. We are experts in the work that we do. We're bringing this information to you so that you have new tools. Remember that change starts with new information. So we need for you to be safe. We need for you to gather this new information. We need for you to follow all of these tips. We're going to just recap a couple of them for you. I say that it takes 10 to 21 days to form a new habit. That's one of the things I want you to remember. So when you feel that, this is not happening, this is not changing, but you have to change your mind. That means your thoughts, your words, and your actions. Please take that with you as you engage in this process of change and making yourself safe and making others safe. So, Rochelle, would you like to just do a couple of recaps?
Yeah, so for your personal safety, first and foremost, just remember that your life is worth the fight, and there are people who do love you and want you to stick around. You have to be prepared in the event of an emergency. You cannot be scared. You have to be prepared, and that could be as simple as having something in your hand whenever you're walking to and from a location, just to give you that extra sense of confidence so that you can feel that if you are approached or potentially attacked, you have something to fight back with and you can have the opportunity to flee to safety, because that's the name of the game. You're not necessarily looking to kill the person, but you are looking to incapacitate them so that you can flee to safety, and they can worry about whatever the injury was that you inflicted on them and wonder why it was that you, the nice-looking person that you were, decided to inflict some pain on them. But that's what I would suggest, is just to pay attention to what's going on, pay attention to your surroundings, and be ready at all times.
Thank you. Crystal?
Yes, ma'am. Figure out what your financial masterpiece looks like. What is it that you want your financial life to be? Write it out. Don't worry about how you're going to get there. Just start to write it out. And then you need some assistance with helping you get there. So you need a financial strategist, a financial planner. You have to break through that notion. A lot of people think, oh, well, I don't have a lot of money. I can't have, I don't need. If you don't have, that's exactly why you need, because you need someone to be able to help you to reach those goals. And then you have to work to be an asset and not a liability. You have to work to be an asset and not a liability. And lastly, I always say, once you figure out what your picture looks like, and this could be anything in your life, financial, spiritual, health, whatever that is, when you figure out what that looks like for you and what you ultimately want, take inventory of who you deal with the most. So who are those 5 people that you talk to the most? And are they helping you realize your goals and your dreams? And if not, why do you spend so much time talking to them, right? You have to you have to stay plugged in to the energy, the people, and the knowledge that will help you get to your next level. And it may not be those 5 people that you are associating with right now.
And with that, we want to first thank our El Boog, our engineer in the house. We want to thank Calvin Mann and Dave Patterson, our normal co-host, to allow us to take over and share these tools and information with you. I want to just, if we have a moment, just give everybody an opportunity how they can reach out to each one of you. You can reach me at yourinspiredjourney.com. Rochelle?
Personalprotecther.com.
And crystallized.faith. And that's crystallized with 1 L.
Thank you. Thank you again for seeing us through this Monday. We will see you for one other week, for one more Monday, special Monday and that. And we are going to see you then. And by all means, Lord, keep family first.
Absolutely.
Amen.
Thank you.